This is a May Luna Media production.
I am Ava Marie Anderson, your quantum loving, spiritually savage bestie. And today we are talking about sacred space, but not the aesthetic version, not the I bought a candle and now I'm healed version, but I'm talking about the kind of space that your body recognizes before your brain even has a chance to form a thought. Because right now I am sitting in the middle of mine and she is deeply unfinished. Like I just moved here from San Diego to Bellevue, packed up an entire life, drove two 13-hour days with my Frenchies, stopped at an emergency vet in Oregon for a literal methadone shot for Rambo. So that was like a spiritual test. And then landed here on a full moon in Libra like the dramatic main character that I am. So I spent 5 days floor camping. No furniture, just me, the boys, not even a fucking mattress, and a suspicious amount of emotional processing. And now the pod is here and the big stuff is unpacked, but the rest is just pure chaos. Like crystals everywhere, tarot decks stacked like little portals, random objects that only make sense to me just scattered around the apartment like spiritual breadcrumbs. And here's the part that messed with me. It doesn't feel chaotic. It feels alive, like the space is doing something, like it is calibrating to me while I am calibrating to it. And that's when it hit me. Like sacred space isn't something you create when everything is done. Sacred space is something that you feel, even while everything is still becoming. And this is where we're going to go deeper than people usually do because your home is not just where you live. It is a biological, neurological, and energetic feedback system. Your brain is constantly scanning it. Your nervous system is constantly responding to it, and your body is literally syncing to it. And we can explain this in two ways, and both are true. So, from a science perspective, your brain is running on something called predictive processing. It's taking in sensory data like light and sound and layout and objects, and then asking one core question. Am I safe here? But not just physically safe. I'm talking like emotionally safe and identity safe and expansion safe. Like, does this space match who I am? Or does it feel like somewhere I have to perform? And your answer to that question happens before you consciously think anything. Now, from the woo perspective, but like grounded woo, like we're not going to float away here. Everything in your environment holds a pattern, a frequency, not in a mystical, this crystal will fix your life kind of way, but in a coherence versus incoherence kind of way. Like, is this space organized in a way that your body can relax into, or is it subtly dysregulating you? Because your nervous system doesn't lie. You can tell yourself a space is beautiful, but if your shoulders are tight and your breath is shallow and you can't fully exhale in it, your body already gave you the answer. And this is why two people can walk into the same room and have completely different experiences because sacred space is not universal. It is relational. It is based on your history and your identity and your emotional associations and what your nervous system has learned to recognize as home. So when I'm sitting here surrounded by crystals and tarot cards and little pockets of magic that probably look like chaos to somebody else, my nervous system is going, oh, we know this. This is us. We are safe to fully exist here. And then that creates something incredibly important, and that's coherence. Coherence is where everything changes. Because when your internal state and your external environment match, your brain stops scanning for threat. Like your body stops bracing and your energy, and yeah, I'm going to go there, it stops leaking. And then you get access to something that most people are starving for, and that's presence and creativity and expansion and actual alignment. So, today we're going to break this down from both sides. We're going to talk about why your nervous system reads a room before you do, and why objects aren't neutral and your brain is literally forming identity loops around them. We're going to talk about what's actually happening with crystals without making them responsible for your life choices, and how you are imprinting your space in real time, especially in moments of transition. We're also going to talk about why your version of sacred space might look a little chaotic, but feel exactly right. And then we're going to end with something that I think is wildly underrated, and that's whimsy. Because your home isn't supposed to look curated, it's supposed to feel like your soul got comfortable here. So if your space is a little messy right now, or a little unfinished, or a little I don't know where anything goes yet energy, good. You are not behind. You are in the most powerful phase of creating something sacred. So let's get into it. Welcome to the Synaptic Soul Podcast, where science meets spirit and they totally make out. I'm Ava Marie Anderson, your quantum-loving, spiritually savage bestie, here to prove your energy isn't mystical, it is measurable. And oh, quick heads up, if you hear snoring or grunting or a dramatic sigh mid-download, that is not a ghost in the machine. It's just my Frenchie co-hosts, Rocky and Rambo, vibing at their own frequency. Let's dive in. All right, now we're going to take what we just opened and go deeper. Like physics meets biology meets, oh shit, I feel seen deeper. Because when we say your nervous system reads a room, that's actually an oversimplification. It's not just reading, it is sensing fields. And I want you to hear that very literally, not metaphorically and not spiritually romanticized. Your body is an electrical system. Your brain communicates through electrical impulses. Your heart generates the largest electromagnetic field in your body. Your nervous system is constantly sending and receiving signals, not just internally, but in response to your environment. So when you walk into a space and feel something instantly, it's not just psychology. It's bioelectric interaction with your environment. And now let's ground this in physics before we float away. So everything around you, walls, objects, furniture, crystals, even the air is made out of atoms. Those atoms are in motion. That motion creates vibration, and vibration creates patterns of energy. Again, not woo. This is quantum level behavior of matter. So your environment is not static. It is a dynamic field of moving, interacting particles, and your body is also a dynamic field. So when you enter a space, what's actually happening is not that you're observing the room, it's that your field is interacting with the room's field. And then your nervous system is the interface that translates that interaction into a feeling. That's why you don't have to think about it, you just know. And now let's bring this back into biology so we don't lose the thread. So your brain is constantly running predictions about your environment. This is predictive processing. It's taking in visual input and auditory input and spatial awareness and memory associations. And then it's asking, does this match what we expect? Is this coherent with what we know? And then here's where physics sneaks back in through the back door. Like your brain is essentially trying to minimize prediction error, which means that it wants your internal model of the world to match what's actually happening externally. So when those match, you feel safe and calm and regulated. But when they don't, you feel uneasy and tense and like something is off. And you might not even be able to explain why. And now layer that in with your current environment. Like you're sitting in a space that visually might look chaotic to somebody else, like crystals everywhere, tarot decks, objects not fully placed. From a purely aesthetic standpoint, somebody might walk in and go, oh, this is disorganized. But your nervous system is having a completely different experience because your internal model, your identity, your associations, your emotional history, it matches what you're seeing. So instead of prediction error, you get prediction confirmation. It's like, yeah, this is us. This makes sense. Yes, we belong here. And then that creates coherence. But let's take this one step further into actual quantum principles without making it weird. So, in quantum physics, there's this concept that systems tend toward lower energy states when they are coherent. So that means when things are organized, aligned, and not fighting each other, they require less energy to maintain. Your body works the same way. So when your internal state, like your thoughts and your emotions and your identity, is aligned with your external environment, you use less energy bracing against it, less micro tension, less subconscious scanning, less something's just not right here. And then that frees up energy for creativity and intuition and presence. So, sacred space isn't just about how something feels emotionally, it's about how much your energy that your system has to expend just to exist in it. And now, let's talk about something that doesn't get enough attention. Like your body is not just sensing the obvious, it's sensing spatial density and object distribution and light diffusion and even subtle patterns of your environment. Like, this is where things like sacred geometry and layout come in, but we'll go deeper into that later. For now, I want you to understand this. Your nervous system is constantly mapping your environment in terms of, is this predictable? Is this patterned? Is this something we can relax into? And when it finds patterns that it recognizes, especially patterns tied to identity and meaning, it settles, which brings us back to your crystal covered, not quite set up apartment. From the outside, it might look like randomness, but from your nervous system's perspective, it is a highly patterned field of meaning. Each object is a node in a network that your brain understands. Each placement, even if it's temporary, is part of a system that your body recognizes. So instead of chaos, your body experiences familiarity and identity coherence and emotional safety. And that is why it feels good. Not because it's done, but because it's aligned with you in this moment. And here's the part that I really want you to take with you. Your nervous system is not trying to create a perfect environment. It's trying to create a predictable, coherent field where it doesn't have to work so hard. So if your space looks perfect but doesn't feel right, your body will stay on edge. But if your space looks a little chaotic but feels like you, your body will relax. Because coherence always wins over perfection every fucking time. So when we talk about sacred space, we're not talking about aesthetics. We're talking about field interaction and energy efficiency and nervous system coherence. And the moment that you actually understand that, you stop trying to make your space look right and you start just paying attention to whether or not it feels like something that your body can land in. Because that is where sacred actually begins. All right, now we're going to take this into territory that people either oversimplify or completely butcher. And I'm going to try my hardest not to butcher it because we're going to talk about objects, but like not as things, as anchors in a field of probability. And yeah, we're going to go there. So let's start grounded so we don't lose the plot. Your brain does not experience reality as a neutral, objective environment. It experiences reality as a constructed model based on memory and association and prediction. Every object in your space is not just seen, it is interpreted. And that interpretation is based on neural networks built from past experiences. It's basic neuroscience, Hebbian learning, that basically neurons that fire together wire together. So every time you've interacted with a crystal or a tarot deck or just a specific object, your brain has paired it with a state or an emotion or a version of you. And now, here's where we take the step into quantum language carefully but intentionally. So, at the quantum level, particles exist in a state of superposition, like multiple potential states at once, until they are observed, measured, or interacted with. And now, I'm not saying that your rose quartz is out there in a literal quantum superposition of healing and not healing, but your relationship to that object, that absolutely exists in a field of potential. Because an object in your environment can represent your past self, your current self, your future self, all at once until you interact with it. And when you do, you collapse it into meaning. And let me make this real. Like, you look at your tarot deck, an object that is not neutral, it's holding multiple potentials. Like, this is just a deck of cards, or this is a tool for intuition, or this is who I am when I trust myself, or this is a practice that connects me to something deeper. Which version activates? That depends on your interaction. It depends on your state. It depends on your attention. And attention, this is key, is one of the most powerful forces that we have. So, from a neuroscience perspective, attention determines what neural pathways activate. From a physics perspective, attention is a form of measurement. It selects what becomes relevant in a system. So every time you direct attention toward an object, you are reinforcing a specific version of reality tied to that object. And now let's zoom out. Your entire environment is filled with these objects, which means that your space is not just a collection of things, it is a field of potential identities. Every object is asking, who are you when you see me? And your brain answers automatically. So, if your space is filled with objects that connect you to expansion and curiosity and self trust and meaning, then your brain is constantly collapsing reality into I am somebody who expands, or I am somebody who trusts myself, or I am somebody who is deeply connected. But on the flip side, if your space is filled with objects that connect you to obligation or outdated identities or emotional heaviness, then your brain collapses reality into I am still that version of me, or I am still carrying this, or I am still tied to this energy. And this is where spirituality has always been pointing, just with a different language. Like altars, sacred objects, ritual tools, these weren't random. They were intentional anchors, like objects chosen specifically to hold meaning and direct attention and reinforce identity. Because when you repeatedly interact with the same object in a specific state, you create a feedback loop. Like neuroscience calls it neural reinforcement. Spirituality calls it ritual. Physics, you could argue it's a system stabilizing into a repeated pattern, reducing entropy locally through consistent input. Different languages, same fucking thing. And now let's bring it back to your current space. Like you got crystals everywhere, tarot decks, objects that feel like you, and instead of everything being perfectly placed, they're active, they're accessible, they're in your field. So what's happening? You are repeatedly interacting with objects that reinforce intuition and grounding and curiosity and identity. And your brain is strengthening those circuits every single time. Not because you sat down and said, I am rewiring my neural pathways today, but because your environment is doing it passively, effortlessly. Now, here's where I want to add a layer that a lot of people miss. Your brain is lazy in the best way. Like it just wants efficiency, so it looks for shortcuts. And objects become shortcuts. You don't have to think your way into a state. When your environment cues you into it, that is powerful because it means that your space can either support the version of who you're becoming or anchor you to the version that you've outgrown. And the difference isn't the object itself, it's the meaning attached to it. So, when we talk about sacred space, we're not talking about having the right objects. We're talking about having objects that collapse you into the version of yourself that you want to live as over and over and over again. And this is why your current mess is actually kind of genius because nothing is hidden. Everything is visible, everything is active, which means that you're constantly interacting with these identity anchors, constantly reinforcing this is who I am now. So instead of rushing to organize or instead of trying to make everything look perfect, what if you just asked, what do these objects call out of me? What version of me shows up when I'm surrounded by this? Because that's the real function of sacred objects. It's not to change your life, but to remind you who the fuck you are. And when that reminder is everywhere, your reality starts to match it. Not magically, but systematically. And honestly, that's even more powerful. All right, now we're going to step into the part where things get a little mystical, but we're going to stay rooted in physics so that we don't float off into delusion. Because up until now, we've talked about your nervous system as a field sensor and objects as anchors of identity and meaning. But now we need to talk about something deeper, and that's resonance. Because sacred space isn't something that you see, it is something that you sync to. But let's start with the physics. So, resonance is what happens when one system begins to vibrate in harmony with another system. And you've seen this in real life, even if you didn't call it that. like two tuning forks. Hit one and the other starts vibrating, or two pendulums. Leave them long enough and they sync up. That is not magic. That is energy systems seeking coherence. And now bring that into your body. Your brain has electrical rhythms. They're brain waves. It's your beta, which is focused and alert, and your alpha, which is relaxed and creative, and your theta, which is deep and intuitive, and your delta, which is restorative and unconscious. Your heart has rhythms. Your breath has rhythms. Your nervous system has rhythms. Like, you are not static. You are a rhythmic system. And now here's where it all gets interesting. Your environment also has rhythms, not obvious ones like a ticking clock, but subtle ones, like how sound moves in a room, or how light diffuses across surfaces, or how energy reflects or absorbs off of materials, or even just the spatial proportions of a room. All of that creates a kind of environmental frequency pattern, and your body is constantly syncing to it. This is called entrainment. Your internal rhythms begin to match the external rhythms. So when you walk into a space and feel instantly calm, it is not just a vibe. Your nervous system is literally going, oh, we can slow down to match this. But when you walk into a chaotic, loud, cluttered space and feel overstimulated, your system is trying to keep up with the incoherent input. It's like too many competing signals and too much unpredictability and too much to process. So your body speeds up, not because you choose it, but because it's responding. And now let's layer in the mystical side, but let's stay grounded here. Ancient cultures understood this without using the word resonance. They built spaces that were designed to tune the human body, like think temples and cathedrals and sacred sites, like high ceilings and specific geometric ratios and stone that reflects sound in particular ways. These were not aesthetic choices, they were frequency decisions, and we still feel it today. Like places like Göbekli Tepe, you walk in and something in your body just starts to shift. Not because you intellectually understand the architecture, but because your system is responding to the coherence of the space. And now let's bring that back to your apartment, because here's the part that people don't realize. You are doing this on a micro level. Your space right now is creating a frequency pattern, not because you sat down and engineered it, but because of the objects and the materials and the light and the layout and the way that energy moves through the room. Like your crystals reflect and reflect light differently. They absorb and distribute heat differently. They create micro variations in your visual field, like even your salt lamps. They soften the light, they shift the color temperature, and they literally signal to your nervous system to slow the fuck down and regulate. Like your space as a whole is not random. It is a field of interacting inputs, and your body is constantly syncing to it. And now, let's just take it one level deeper. Resonance doesn't just happen between you and the space, it happens between you and yourself. Because when your environment is coherent, your internal systems start to align. Your breath deepens, your thoughts slow down, your emotional state stabilizes, and suddenly you're not fragmented, you're integrated. And that is the real magic of sacred space. It doesn't give you something new, it brings you back into alignment with what is already there. And now, here's where the mystical and the quantum start holding hands again. So, there's this idea in quantum physics that systems tend toward coherence when energy is minimized and patterns stabilize. So, in spiritual language, we might say you feel like yourself again. It's same thing, just different language. So, when you're sitting in your space right now with your crystals everywhere and your tarot decks are out and things aren't fully placed yet, but it still feels good, that is not an accident. That is resonance. Your environment is reflecting your internal state, and your internal state is syncing with your environment. It's a feedback loop. And this is why sacred space feels so powerful, because it's not something you have to force. You don't walk into a sacred space and try to relax. You relax because your body is already synced to it. So instead of asking, does my space look right? Start asking, what is my space tuning me into? Like, is it speeding you up, or is it calming you down? Is it making you scattered, or is it helping you feel like you can finally land? because your environment is always doing something. It's either creating coherence or it's creating noise. And the more intentional you become about what you surround yourself with, the more you start to realize that you are not just decorating your space, you are tuning your entire system. And when your system is tuned, you don't have to chase alignment. You're already in it. And that is where things start to feel a little bit like magic. All right, now we're going to step into the part that feels the most mystical, but it's actually rooted in patterns that we can point to across physics and biology and human behavior. Because this is where we talk about something people feel all the time, but we don't always have the language for. It's why some spaces feel charged and why some spaces feel heavy. Maybe even why some spaces feel like they're holding something even when nothing is visibly happening. And no, we're not going to immediately jump to ghosts. We're going to go somewhere much more interesting. So let's start grounded. Your brain encodes experiences in context. This is called context dependent memory, meaning the emotional and physiological state that you experience in a specific environment gets linked to that environment. So if you cry in a room, or you heal in a room, or you expand in a room, or you create in a room, your brain starts associating that space with those states. And over time, just being in that space can bring those states back online just automatically and without effort. And now let's zoom out, because it's not just that your brain is doing this, it's that your entire nervous system is involved. Like your breath patterns and your muscle tension and your emotional baseline, all of it becomes tied to environment. So when we say this room feels peaceful or this space feels heavy, what we're actually saying is that my body recognizes the pattern that has been repeated here. And now let's take the step into the quantum lens, but we're going to do it a little responsibly. So, in quantum physics, there's this concept called entanglement. So, where two systems interact, even after they're separated, they remain correlated. So, changes in one reflect in the other. And now, again, I'm not saying that your couch is quantum entangled with your emotions in a literal particle pair experiment sense, but what I am saying is this: when you repeatedly interact with a space in a specific state, you create a persistent relationship between you, your state, and that environment. And your nervous system doesn't forget that. And now let's layer in something else. Your body is constantly emitting signals. It's electrical, it's chemical, it's electromagnetic. Your heart alone generates a measurable electromagnetic field that extends far beyond your body. So when you exist in a space, you are not just in it. You are interacting with it. You are influencing it. You are leaving patterns within it. And now here's where we're going to bring it together. Like, think about repetition, because repetition is what stabilizes patterns. If you repeatedly sit in your space and feel grounded, or light a candle and drop into presence, or pull cards and connect inward and process and release and expand, you are reinforcing a pattern, not just internally, but in your relationship with that space. And this is where the mystical language actually starts to make sense, because what people call this space feels sacred is often just this space has been consistently associated with coherent, regulated, meaningful states. And over time, that becomes the dominant pattern. And now, let's bring it into your current reality, because this is the most important part. You're in what I would call a highly plastic phase of your environment. Nothing is fixed yet, nothing is finalized. Everything is still being arranged and moved and touched and interacted with. It's kind of like wet cement, and every moment you exist in it, it leaves a mark. So, every time you sit in your space and you feel like yourself, or interact with your crystals, or engage in your practices, or just feel grounded, expanded, and connected, you are imprinting that pattern. And because everything is still fluid, those imprints are strong. And now let's take it a step further into the quantum mystical perspective. In physics, systems tend to stabilize into patterns that are repeated. In spirituality, we might call that energy imprinting or holding frequency. It's the different language but same principle. So, what you're doing now is not just setting up your apartment. You are stabilizing a field. You're conditioning a space. You're teaching your nervous system and your environment how to interact. And later, and this is the part that gets really cool, when everything is placed, when everything looks done, you're going to walk into that space and feel something immediately. And it won't be because of how it looks, it'll be because your body recognizes the pattern. You'll sit down and you'll feel your shoulders drop. You'll walk in and you'll exhale. You'll will exist in a space and feel seen. Oh, this is where I come back to myself. And that is when a space crosses the threshold into something sacred. Not when it's decorated and not when it's perfect, but when it has been lived in and felt in and patterned through presence. So instead of like rushing this phase, instead of trying to force everything into place, what if you just leaned into it? What if you let yourself feel in the space and exist in the space and become in the space without needing it to be finished? Because this phase, this in between, slightly chaotic, still unfolding moment, this is where the deepest imprinting happens. And the way that you feel in your space right now is what it will remember later. Not consciously and not logically, but in the language that your body understands best, which is pattern and repetition and resonance. So, what I'm trying to say is that you're not behind and you're not disorganized and you're never fucking doing it wrong. You're in the most potent phase of creating something sacred. And honestly, that is where the real magic lives. All right. If everything we just talked about is true, and it is, then your space is not just regulating you. It is also either collapsing you into limitation or opening you into possibility. And this is where we talk about something that sounds soft, but is actually wildly powerful. It's whimsy, it's beauty, it's things that make no logical sense but make your nervous system light up. Now, let's just start with the science because I know some of you are like, okay, Ava, what does this actually do? So, your brain has multiple networks that are constantly balancing each other. And one of the big ones is the default mode network. This is the part of your brain responsible for imagination and identity and future thinking and meaning making. It's what allows you to step outside of the present moment and ask, who am I becoming and what else is possible? But here's the catch. This network doesn't activate when you're in survival mode. Like your nervous system is stressed and overwhelmed and dysregulated, your brain shifts into efficiency mode. Like solve the problem, stay safe, conserve energy. No expansion, no creativity, no possibility, which is why you haven't had many podcasts out of me this year. And now let's bring it into the environment. If your space is purely functional, clean and minimal and stripped down and nothing extra, it might feel calm, but it can also feel flat because there's nothing in it that invites your brain to wander, nothing that sparks curiosity, nothing that disrupts predictability in a way that feels safe. And now enter whimsy and beauty and unexpected detail. Like that crystal that catches light and flashes, or that object that makes you smile for no reason, or that tarot deck sitting there like, pull a card, I dare you. Like these things introduce novelty. And novelty is one of the fastest ways to activate dopamine. And now here's where it gets really interesting. Dopamine's not just about pleasure. It's about anticipation and possibility. It's the chemical that says something new could happen here. And now let's take that into the quantum lens, again, responsibly. So, at a quantum level, systems exist in a field of potential states until something collapses them into a specific outcome. So, in your life, that collapse often happens through attention and belief and action. But before any of that, there has to be access to possibility. And your environment either supports that or it shuts it the fuck down. So, when your space includes elements that surprise you or delight you or make you pause or make you just feel slightly magical, you're keeping your system open to there is more available here. And this is why whimsy is not just extra. It is not just decorative. It is neurologically and energetically functional. Like, let's layer in something deeper. Your nervous system doesn't just regulate based on safety, it regulates based on meaning as well. So, if your space feels meaningful to you, if it reflects your identity and your evolution and your inner world, your system doesn't just calm down, it engages. And engagement is where expansion happens because now you're not just surviving in your environment, you're interacting in it, you're co creating with it. But let's bring this back to you. Your space right now, my space right now, crystals everywhere, tarot decks out, objects not fully placed, little pockets of magic scattered around. And instead of feeling overwhelming, it feels like something is opening, and that's not accidental. What has been created is an environment that is regulating enough to feel safe and stimulating enough to feel alive and meaningful enough to feel like you. And that combination, by the way, that is where transformation happens. Because when your system is both safe and open, you gain access to something most people are disconnected from. And that's your intuition and your creativity and your deeper awareness and the ability to see beyond your current reality. But here's where the mystical piece comes in. Because when people talk about raising your vibration, what they're often trying to describe is this: a state where your system is coherent and regulated and open to possibility, not floating and not detached and not bypassing reality, but fully present and aware that reality is not fixed. And your space plays a massive role in that because it's the field where you're constantly interacting with. So if your environment is rigid and lifeless and purely functional, your system adapts to that. It becomes efficient and controlled and limited. But if your environment includes beauty and curiosity and meaning and maybe even just a little bit of magic, your system adapts to that too. It becomes open and creative and expansive. And that's when you start to feel like, oh, there is more available to me. Not because something outside of you changed, but because your internal state shifted. And from that state, you make different decisions. You see different opportunities. You show up differently. So, when we talk about sacred space, we're not just talking about creating something that looks perfect. We're talking about creating a space that keeps you connected to possibility and identity and expansion and your fucking self, dude. And if that space looks a little like chaotic and maybe a little magical and a little like you're still figuring it all out, good. Because that means that it's not static, it's alive and a living space, a space that evolves with you and responds to you and reflects you in real time. Like, that's not just sacred. That is a portal, not to somewhere else, but to a version of you that is already waiting to come online. And your only job is to keep showing up in the space as her. Because the more that you do, the more your environment reflects it back. And that reflection is where everything starts to change. You have been listening to the Synaptic Soul Podcast, where science meets spirit and they totally make out. If this episode hit your frequency, do me a favor, rate it, review it, and share it with your fellow quantum weirdos. It helps the wavelength reach more souls. And if you caught a little snoring, that wasn't a portal, just my Frenchies Rocky and Rambo offering background blessings. Music is Cheat Code by 1,000 Hands, used under Creative Commons. And I am Ava Marie Anderson. Stay weird, stay wired, and keep making out with your higher self.